The word apocalypse is used constantly today in news, media, entertainment, and even everyday conversation. But that modern usage is very different from the ancient meaning of that term. So let's rewind and look at the apocalypse as a literary genre. What is it? When does it show up? And what is it really offering to readers? The English word apocalypse comes from the Greek term apocalupsis, which literally means to unveil, disclose, or uncover something. At its core then, this Greek term is actually not about a future catastrophic event. That's more familiar from common popular usage today. Rather, in the ancient world, an apocalypsis was closely connected to a literary genre that claimed bold, new, special revelation disclosed to a given historical community and to be understood and interpreted in their specific historical context. The first ancient writing to formally introduce itself as an apocalypse is the book of Revelation found in the Christian New Testament. This work opens with the phrase, "This is the revelation, the apocalupsis of Jesus Christ." Now, this is significant for several reasons. One of them is that this author introduces the work this way without ever explaining what he means. Now, this suggests that the community he's speaking to already has some understanding or cultural awareness of what this genre was. Our challenge is that we don't share that same cultural context, so we have to rethink and even rediscover what an ancient apocalypse was. The book of Revelation is a very important ancient apocalypse, yet there were many other apocalypses before it and after in ancient Judaism and Christianity. The question then is, how do we wrap our arms around all of this diverse evidence and try to define it? One of the more important definitions of the apocalypse came together in 1979 in a journal called Semea in their 14th issue. This is often called the Semea 14 definition of the apocalypse, and it's still the orbit around which many discussions on apocalyptic literature exist today. Semea 14 defined the apocalypse as follows. An apocalypse is a genre of revelatory literature with a narrative framework in which a revelation is mediated by an otherworldly being to a human recipient. This is disclosing a transcendent reality, which is both temporal, insofar as it envisages eschatological salvation, and spatial, insofar as it involves another supernatural world. Unpacking that definition already gives us a sense of some of the main features of the apocalypse genre, like this claim to special revelation that somehow makes sense of time, past, present, and future, or even collapses spatial boundaries, or perhaps gives special insight into the unseen realms behind present reality. This definition is a valuable anchor point, but it also needs to be organic for two reasons. First, we're learning more about ancient apocalypses due to the discovery of new texts, for example, many of the writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Second, we're always learning more through new approaches or fresh strategies for reading these ancient texts in their ancient historical contexts. Of course, no two ancient apocalypses were the same. They might share that common framework of the genre, but then a given author would tailor it to speak a specific message to a historical community. That idea of a special revelation cuts across most apocalypses. Several apocalypses project an end that is almost always around the corner, so there's an urgency to them. Many apocalyptic writings are spoken into or out of spaces of injustice, historical oppression, and have a clear anti-imperial edge. Some of the major themes of apocalypses include things like angels and demons and afterlives, all things that are somewhat limited or at best nascent in biblical texts, but really come into their own in apocalyptic writings. So what does this mean for reading ancient apocalypses? It means that our best strategy is to try and understand that world, that context that gave rise to that text, to interpret it in light of its own day, rather than try to decode its message for something cryptic and making sense in our own time or perhaps in the distant future. We've just outlined the apocalypse as an ancient literary genre, which is far more rich, complex, and nuanced than the modern and common usage of that term might suggest. These writings invite us into times and places past, so we can watch, learn, and observe how a writer in their historical community was contending with seeming impossible odds, reflecting on real loss or living in trauma, and trying to find their way forward in an uncertain world. These writings also have a long, rich, and sometimes problematic history of interpretation, as a specific community, culture, or even charismatic leader might pick up one of those writings and try to decode it for their own day or the distant future. Yet when these writings are read responsibly and rooted in interpretations from their historical context, the apocalypses are remarkable, brilliant, and even genius in how that they've come from the ancient world to today, offering insight into communities as they reflected on their real anxieties and projected hope on the horizon. I hope you enjoyed this crash course on the apocalypse as an ancient literary genre. Please do like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribe to this channel so you get updates on this new mini-series I'm developing called Apocalypses Then and Now. We'll encounter apocalypses in their ancient context, as well as trace some of their history of interpretation and afterlives down to our own day. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.